Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, and thanks for tuning in to another virtual event. We're always happy to have Robert Dugoni with us in person, virtually, however we can get him. And today he's going to be discussing his new book, Beyond Reasonable Doubt. And as always, Bob very kindly signed a whole bunch of them for us. And so we don't have a whole lot left. So if you want one, I'll go ahead and put a link in the comments field and you can go ahead and order one. And also, if you have questions, put them in there and Barbara will bring me back towards the end of the hour. And I would be happy to ask any questions you might have. So, Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Robert, it's always a pleasure. This is our 35th birthday month, and so we're trying to spend it with authors whose entire career has spanned our career. And Bob is one of those authors. You joined Lee Child and Michael Connolly, and it's exciting.
Yeah, I'm honored. I was gonna say, happy anniversary. That's quite a milestone, and I'm so proud to be part of it.
Well, believe me, we couldn't have done it without you. I mean, it's a reciprocal thing, but it was interesting talking to Michael Connolly Saturday night, 39th book, 32 years together. I mean, that's a really long curve, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I was saying to somebody the other day, had a picture up on my wall of these shadow boxes that I get, and I said, I don't know what this means. Either I've written a lot of books or I've gotten old. One of the
Or
two.
both. Unfortunately, it does mean if you get to be 35 and you started a bookstore 35
Yeah.
years ago, you got old with it. But anyway, it's really been wonderful to walk this journey with authors like Bob. And so I'm really delighted that he has once again agreed to talk with us. He was here in person in the spring, but he can't come down from Seattle every time. But we'll hope to lure him back. When's your next book coming out?
I'm hoping to come down in January when Hold Strong comes out.
Oh, yay. Well,
That
that
would
would
be
be,
great.
yeah,
Yeah.
love it. And taking a leaf out of our book our playbook from last spring when we went to do an offsite event, we did one today with Lee Child and, not Lee, sorry, Andrew and Tasha at a different place in Scottsdale, and they were really great. So maybe we'll arrange another offsite event or two. We're hoping as we move along here that the Poison Pen is able to do more community partnership events. We're great online, but I think that we have work to do in tying into local businesses and so forth. So anyway, I thought about you while we were doing it because the contrast in book sales was amazing. Right. So we could figure that out.
Yeah,
Anyway,
no.
Bob is the author of so many different kinds of books. I mean, he started writing legal thrillers with David Slum, but now we have Tracy Crosswhite, Charles Jenkins, a trilogy, spy stories that I truly love, and Kira Dugan, whose first book actually, I thought was terrific, and the name of which has totally gone out of my head. What is it?
Her Deadly Game.
Thank you. Her Deadly Game. So I like Kira a lot. And one of the things, and then he's written some individual books like The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell and The World Played Chess. Um, and so the problem for Bob is that he has more books to write than he actually has time to write them. And we talked about that, and I wasn't sure that Kira was going to get another book because Tracy is kind of your main squeeze.
Yeah.
But but David is wound up, and you decided not to write more Charles Jenkins, that his spy Russia connection thing, a trilogy had pretty much done it. So I guess Kira came up in the rotation.
Y- Um, I still have these thoughts of another Charles Jenkins book. I'd love to do another William Schumacher book, the first one, A Killing on the Hill. I just love the cast of characters in that book. But as you mentioned, it's not a problem. It's a reality you have to face, which is, if you have a Tracy book come out, 9 months later you have a Kira book come out. Well, then 9 months later till the next Tracy, it's asking readers to wait 18 months in between, books in a series. And that could be a long time. If I had a third one in there, you could be asking readers to wait 27 months because one of the problems you begin to have is you begin to cannibalize your own books, right? Because you're putting them out so frequently, readers are trying to keep up and which series do they want to read and there's a lot of other really great stories out there being written by a lot of really great authors. So, it's a nice problem to have, but it does exist. You do have to think about those kinds of things.
Well, it is a nice problem to have in the sense that many writers struggle to come up with a book idea, every year or every 2 years, whereas you're an absolute fountain. So your problem is having enough time to write a lot of books which is different. And I'm glad you mentioned the William Shoemaker book because I thought A Killing on the Hill was one of your very best books. It was our historical mystery pick last spring in the month that it came out, and it may have sold better than many of the Tracy's for us. People just loved it.
Yeah, I really loved that story, and it's based on true events. It took place in 1933. My wife's grandfather was an attorney. I found his scrapbook. It's just a great story behind the story. Um, and I don't know what it was, but people it's almost selling more like a literary novel, which it doesn't necessarily take off like this. It kind
Right.
of has this slow build, slow burn type of thing as people come to sort of to recognize. It's also listed as a thriller. And I don't know if maybe it's not so much a thriller, but maybe a little bit more of a historical mystery. It's hard. It sort of straddles a couple of different things, but it's doing very well. And I'd love to get back to William Schumacher someday. I have another Tracy that's been written, which is called A Deadly Draw. That'll be out, I think, next May. And then I just turned in the latest Kira book, which is the third in the series, which is called Her Cold Justice. So there's books in the pipeline, and I've had a nice week off, Barb. I've had a really
Well,
nice.
that's great. We're catching Bob tonight. This is actually the book lunch because he's
Yes,
getting out to do some promotional work. Where are you going? Are you signing in Seattle and then where?
I'll be signing in Seattle at Book Tree, which is my local bookstore here. I'll be down in the Bay Area doing a couple of events, the Alamo Women's Club and then the Town Center Books. Both of those will be next Thursday. And then, I'm coming back up here. I have a family wedding, and I think I think you and I talked about this last time. I think I'm going to travel over 110,000 miles this year. And it's a lot.
It is a lot, but some of that is you do it for fun. I mean,
Yeah.
it isn't all work travel for you.
No, no, it is.
But why not? Lead your best life while you can do it. I mean, I had to face, we were on a cruise this summer, and I recognized that there are some things that I just am not in shape for at 83 that I was when I was 63. I'm just not.
Yeah.
So, you should do them while you can do them.
Yeah, I have a brother-in-law and sister that put together all these fabulous trips. They're just in Morocco, but we couldn't do it this year. But you're right. My wife and I celebrated our 30th anniversary in Italy, where we had our honeymoon. I just golfed for a week in Ireland with my friends, so I'm not hurting. I'm living my best life. But I'd say this unabashedly. I love being home. I love my home. I love my house. I love my desk. I love writing. I love being home. I really do.
Well, it's nice that you can do both. I feel the same way. I really enjoy going off. And in fact, I just signed up maybe for a cruise from Melbourne to Singapore because we've reached the point at our age, Bob, where we have to say, where have we not yet been?
Yeah.
We wanted to go. So, repeating is really not an option anymore with probably a limited number of years left to go. And Singapore is a place that my husband has always wanted to go. And I really have wanted to go down under Australia and over to Perth to Tasmania and so forth. We have a nephew living in Melbourne.
Oh, wow.
So, why not sign up, do it? But we're here to talk about Kira, who at book two. I think there's some really interesting ethical issues in this book. I mean, every defense attorney faces ethical issues. The Lincoln Lawyer just started up again, a new one last Thursday, and I haven't seen it yet. But they do discuss some of the problems in that series if you haven't watched it, about what do you do if you're unsure whether your client is guilty, and what do you do if you think your client is maybe going to commit a crime and you have knowledge of it? Are you allowed to report that, even though, client confidentiality is sort of like that whole priest and confession thing. You're not supposed to do that. What if you have a history with the client, which makes you, prejudiced one way or another? Or maybe the client can manipulate you, or so you really dug into that, because Kira's first book was not, she didn't really have that emotional tie. I mean, that was a plot-driven book to a great degree. I thought it was one of your very best plots. And the end of that book, I wish we could talk about it. The end of that book was just brilliant.
Thank you.
But this is a different book, right? This is Kira in a whole different situation, aggravated by the fact that her father, who started the law firm, has always been a drinker, especially a stress drinker. And now he's just too far gone to really run the firm. And so Kira has a real financial responsibility, because if she doesn't do stuff, the firm is gonna fold. I can't remember, Bob. Do they actually owe money? Are they in debt, or is it just that they're limping along?
Well, they're sort of limping along because their father's not that his cases have dried up, but just they're not coming in at the level they once were, because he's not the attorney that he once was. And so, Kira comes in, and of course, Kira has incredible intuitive skills. She's brilliant. She's very good at adapting on the fly, because she's a chess prodigy. So she's very good at thinking up various scenarios and having answers to them the way her father was. And so she steps in, and of course, she is her father as a young woman, in terms of her abilities. But it's going to take a while before they can kind of get back into the black a little bit, and the firm will be doing okay. You raise an interesting question, and I was asked this on a radio show this morning. That ethical question about what does a defense attorney do if they know their client is guilty and they've committed the murder. And years ago, I talked to Phil Margolin, who I know he's a writer down in Portland, and Phil is a lawyer, and Phil defended 30 capital murder cases, and not a single one of his clients ever got the death penalty, which he took as a victory. They all were convicted, but they didn't get the death penalty. And I asked Phil that question, and I remember Phil said to me, it's not his job to get them off. It's his job to ensure that the prosecutor follows all the constitutional rights that defendant is given. And that's what he's defending. Because the minute we start to not defend that, then we have a problem for all of us, right? That if we are not going to, not going to abide by what the Constitution stands for the worst of the worst, that made a lot more sense to me when Phil explained it to me that way.
I think you're right. And I wish unfortunately, I just handed the arc over to Patrick, so I can't quote from it. But Marcia Clark, has written a true crime book. She's been an appellate judge for the last 16 years, I think she said. And of course, her actual courtroom career was pretty much derailed by the O.J. Simpson case. But Marcia is an excellent writer. And in the foreword to this true crime book, the name of which I can't recall, but she's coming to sign it on December 14th for us. And I'm excited about seeing her because I really like her. She took on this case, and it was the movie with Susan Hayward. And the woman, I'm trying to remember the name of the woman that was on trial. I think it was her last name was Graham. I can't remember if it was also Susan. But anyway, she was convicted of a murder during a break-in. And Marcia has written this book, her first true crime book, because she is so outraged at the fact that the defense attorneys did not make the prosecutors follow the constitutional and ethical guidelines. They suppressed Barbara Graham. Thank you. Patrick uses the chat function to save me. It was a movie with Susan Hayward who played it, because the woman does get the death penalty and is put to death in the gas chamber in California in the mid-50s. But anyway, Marcia thinks that there was suppression of evidence, there was prosecutorial misconduct, the cops behaved really badly, there was misogynism involved, the witnesses were unreliable, the whole bit. And why was it that this woman paid this ultimate price? And the answer was that the defense attorney or attorneys did not do their job, just the thing that you are talking about.
Yeah, it's ironic you bring this up because the book that I turned in, her Cold Justice, talks a lot about what you just talked about.
Yeah.
The strongest person, the most powerful person in the criminal justice system is the prosecutor. It's not the judge, it's not the defense attorney, because it's the prosecutor who
Yeah.
decides who to charge, what to charge them with. They
Right.
can overcharge, and a lot of prosecutors will overcharge to try to scare the defendant into taking a plea bargain that may or may not even be justified. And they'll tell them, if you do in the state of Washington, we're gonna seek the death penalty, which they can no longer do up here, but we're gonna seek the death penalty. So it was really interesting. I just did a bunch of research, and there's some really great articles out the strength of which makes prosecutorial misconduct all the more heinous because you're talking about they can destroy a person's life.
Absolutely. And I mean, Marcia was a prosecutor, and she was so outraged when she actually had to dig back into the state archives to find the court reporter's transcripts in order to actually read. Patrick, you're gonna really enjoy this thing. I left you Marcia's arc in order to see just how bad it was. And a jury tends to swing in prejudice towards the prosecution. In other words, why is this person arrested if there wasn't, some
Exactly.
and there are a lot of, dazzling mysteries and all the rest of it about, like Earl Stanley Gardner, Perry Mason never had a guilty client, whatever. I thought the Lincoln Lawyer balanced that kind of interestingly in the second season, between guilt for the client, or was there another crime the client was guilty of, whatever. So kind of exploring that. But and I know both, because I mean I just won. You'll be really proud of me. I've only actually had to face um two trials, and I've won them both. And this time I was on defense, and the other time in the medical malpractice trial, I was basically the prosecutor. But what and from your study of law and my study of law, is that ultimately, most of the time, the person who tells the best story wins, because the jury has to buy, and sometimes they deliver verdicts contravening the evidence because the story convinced them, right?
Yes, absolutely. No, absolutely.
Amazing.
That's another issue raised in this article is is in prosecutorial misconduct is too often prosecutors will forget about what's the actual evidence, and they're telling this story, and they basically win on circumstantial evidence, which
Right.
is not direct evidence, which is evidence that is just if this happened, then you have to believe. Well, it's not. It's just their perception of what the evidence means. It's not the real evidence. And
Right.
so that's another area where, you can get prosecutorial misconduct because it's easy for them to get wrapped up in this game of I win, 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 and tell whatever story they can to get a victory, without really considering the fact, did this person really commit the crime? Now, what you and I are talking about is the 5%. I mean, 95% of crimes are what police officers will call a grounder, right?
Right.
Somebody gets shot and then the guy's got the gun in his hand. But it's that 5% that fascinates all of us as readers and as viewers of television. It's that 5% that we see on that gets covered as there is no direct evidence of who the shooter was. They might have found the gun, but there's no fingerprint. All those little things. That's what makes television. That's what makes the books, and that's what makes the stories much more interesting.
Well, I mean, the Innocent Project exists, in various places. We did an event here at the bookstore for an Arizona man who was released by the Innocence Project, and part of it is to review prosecutorial conduct and see if, in fact, it matches the evidence. And we have more, excuse me, scientific evidence than we used to.
Yeah.
But lots of times trials turned on eyewitnesses, which, were, I'm sorry, unreliable, or misunderstandings about blood splatter, or all kinds of things. And so the Innocent Project is an attempt to kind of fix some of those where it can.
Yeah, and you also have situations now where you have prisoner informants who step forward, and I mean a prisoner informant, they will step forward because if they substantially contribute to the conviction,
Mhm.
And the prosecutor can go to the judge and say, this person substantially contributed to the conviction, and we think his or her sentence should be released, should be reduced as a matter of course. Well, think about that for a minute.
Sure.
I mean, that if you went into prison on a drug charge, a federal drug charge, you don't have any opportunity for parole. I mean, the federal sentencing guidelines did away with all that. So you might be sitting in there for 15 years, and the only way you can get your sentence reduced is to inform on somebody else. Well, you're basically creating this system, of giving people an incentive to lie.
Mhm.
Uh, so there's a lot of really interesting things that come out in the criminal justice system. There really are.
Right. Well, when you say justice, sometimes you have to put parentheses around it. And, it tends to be result driven. And I will say that so often prosecutors, I think Michael Conley does a really great job bringing that out, are under enormous pressure to close a case.
Yeah.
And here in Arizona, this is where Miranda, for example, the whole Miranda warning thing arose, is that there's often a lot of civil pressure, community pressure, political pressure from the police bureaucracy, whatever it is,
Yeah.
to close a case, which gives a lot of pressure on prosecutors. So, journalism, I don't know, we don't have as much, print journalism as we used to, but nonetheless, then there's social media, the whole bit. So how did you decide in this particular, let's go back to the book. So Kira has a childhood friend, and I feel as though this is a case that you probably read something about, at least a similar case, right? Because
Well, people believe that they think it's related to the what was her name?
I know it, I blanked on it
Yeah,
too.
she was Elizabeth. Elizabeth, she was Elizabeth something, not smart, but Elizabeth, where she was convicted of creating a techno company, a product that could take a drop of blood and diagnose all these things. And there was a book written about it called Bad Blood. But the idea really came to me from a member at my golf club. Uh,
Really?
Dr. Dan Bruzak is a wonderful man. He's had Parkinson's for 18 years. And he's a very brilliant man. He still gets out. I just golfed with him yesterday. So he's still out there. And I had said to Dan, I'd love to do something where someone is taking advantage of people's hope,
Mhm.
right? And a techno company that is supposedly on the verge of this breakthrough that really could help a lot of people, and these people that are really seeking hope. And he had told me about a company in Ohio that is able to change skin cells into various different types of cells. And what they've had some success in is creating cells that repair. And so, if you're wounded, you'll heal much faster because they can create more more
Okay.
cells that repair. Well, think about the potential of that. You're talking about cells that can repair a damaged organ. You have a damaged organ, so you create more heart cells, you create more liver cells, and you create cells that disperse dopamine for people that are suffering from Alzheimer's. I mean, from Parkinson's, all kinds of different things. And that's what I did is I took this, fictionalized company that is using a product that can change skin cells into various forms, but it's not there yet. But they need money, right? Those companies need money in order to do the research and the backing, et cetera. So what they're selling is hope. And the saying in Silicon Valley for a long time was fake it until you make it. And
Right.
then suddenly the courts started cracking down on it that you can't do that anymore because basically what it is fraud and misrepresentation. You're telling your investors you're on the verge of this great breakthrough and they're going to make a lot of money when you're not really on the verge. So that's what I wanted is I wanted someone that was dynamic. I wanted someone that was driven, and Jenna Bernstein, who Jenna is, because she went through high school with her. She went through grade school with her. I mean, she knows what she is. She's a person that uses other people. She's a person that manipulates. She's a person that's vindictive. She's a person that can be just mean, just mean-spirited. And as she's gotten older, she hasn't gotten any better. She's actually gotten worse.
Right.
She's pretty much sociopathic.
And so Patsy, Kira's father, Patsy, who is now not able to handle cases in court because of his drinking and just general damage to his body, he defended Jenna on a murder charge, 5 years before this story takes place?
5 years before, her chief scientist in this company ends up dead. And the again, no direct evidence, but the circumstantial evidence certainly points to Jenna being responsible for this guy's death. Now, 5 years later, her CFO, who also happens to be her lover, ends up dead. And again, the evidence points to Jenna. And so Kira comes back, I think, basically from a vacation. She gets called by her sister Maggie, told that she needs to come into the office. Maggie doesn't tell her why. She steps into the conference room, and there's Jenna Bernstein, her high school nemesis.
Yeah.
And here she's going to be accused again, and she wants Patsy to defend her. And Jenna doesn't want to take the case, but does because of the financial constraints on the company and on the law firm and everything. And as she takes the case, she begins to wonder if Jenna had manipulated her father in the first and is now trying to manipulate her.
View of the first time around, and then here we are. But this time about Jenna. I mean, had you decided whether Jenna was guilty or I don't want to say whether she is or not, but had you taken a position about what Jenna had done?
Well, I had. And when I got to the end, I went, my readers are going to hate this. My readers will not like this ending. They will not, this will not be satisfying. And so I really had to go back and for the first time in a long time, because I never know the ending of my books. I let the ending come from what they are. I really had to go back and I really had to go, okay, you know what? I need to sort of reevaluate this and try to come up with something different because readers don't necessarily want a happy ending, but they want an ending that's satisfying. And it's I don't want to say you can't do it, but it's difficult to provide an ending that is not going to be satisfactory to the readers reading your book because they've read 400 pages and then they get to that point where they go, are you kidding me? I just read 400. So I had to sort of go back and reevaluate. And I spent about a month with my editor, Gracie Doyle, just kicking around some various scenarios until I came to the one that I thought, okay, this is one that I think not only is practical and realistic to real life situations, but also that my readers will accept.
I've known you a long time. I have read every one of your books, and I could sense your ambivalence. That's why I asked you the question. When I got to the end, I thought, Bob has some ambivalence about this book and how it's playing out. And that's an interesting thing because what is justice? In respects, and there's a new book out, which it's called Eye of the Beholder by a British author named Emma Bamford. And while I do agree her at the end was a step too far for this woman, everything that happened to her up to then was a remarkable effort on her part to overcome circumstances that were completely unfair, that had been beyond her control. She was a brilliant medical student and whatever, and was attending a small patriarchal university, and she got pregnant. And they threw her out. They would never let her come back. They made it impossible for her to ever finish her medical studies and all. And in the end, she took the identity of a classmate in order to, and she's a brilliant doctor.
Yeah.
So I found that the protagonist was sort of self-righteous about the whole thing. And while it's not okay with me about the murder, my sympathies lie actually with that woman, that she had to
lies for putting up with years of abuse. I mean, it's a lot of lies for putting up with years of abuse. I mean, there's a lot of really ethical questions that are out there that, it's not black and white. In a lot of cases, it's not black and white. And I didn't want this case to be black and white.
Yep. Wasn't there a recent case about a young girl, a real case that ended up killing her abuser or kidnapper or something? And and they wouldn't let it go. I mean, I'm sure it's something I read about that actually has happened recently.
Yeah.
And then I thought, she's a kid. And it's not okay with me that they're trying her for murder or whatever it is. When she ended up, killing the abuser. I don't think I still think, how hard it is, we both know that rape cases were nearly impossible to win forever because they always wound up putting the woman on trial. And I think there's still some of that. I really do, and that's what Marcia Clark was saying in this book about Barbara Graham, that everybody was willing to pile on the woman because she was beautiful and how awful it was. And I think that still happens.
Yeah. And that's not unlike my book. Jenna Bernstein is a very attractive woman. She's tall, she's blonde, she's got a great figure, and she uses what she has to get where she needs to be and what she wants. Now, I'm not saying she's out there sleeping around or anything like that, but she's attractive and she knows how to use that attractiveness to get men to pay attention to her and to get them to provide her with money for these funds and all those kinds of things. Is that something that a woman should be penalized for because she's attractive, because she's good looking, sexy, whatever word you want to use? We don't think in those terms with respect to men. Not really. I mean, there are some cases that have been out there where good looking men have been on trial and that all kind of thing. But really, it's a gender thing as much as it's anything.
It is a gender thing. If you've been reading about that appalling trial in France about the woman whose husband drugged her and, invited men into, and it certainly was rape because she was unconscious. Sorry about the dogs. I can't see nothing. And I thought how brave of this woman to, speak up. And she has really, I think, swung the way everybody was looking at this. What an ordeal for her. But I thought, what guts,
Yeah, certainly in France, people have begun to have some empathy for her and the situation that she was in.
And a lot of the men were going, oh, well, it wasn't really rape. We thought she was just pretending to be asleep. Or her husband invited us over for a threesome, so we thought it'd be okay. She was unconscious.
Yeah.
But, so the defense again lies with not, okay, I did something wrong, but rather, it was her fault because she didn't speak up or whatever it was. And it's just, I'm not sure whether they've come to the end of that trial, but I thought it was just a remarkably brave thing for this woman to do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Of course, the problem you have with Jenna is that basically she really is a psychopath. So despite all those things you just mentioned, the question is, do we really want a psychopath loose?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of sociopathic people that are out there in society, and it was really fun writing the book because part of my research, what comes out in the story, is when Kira is saying, isn't it true that a lot of CEOs of companies are sociopathic? And from my research, the clinical psychologist says, yeah, that's true, and so are lawyers. In other words, touche. And that's true because think about it. I mean, they're positions of power, they're positions of ego, they're positions of high wealth and all that stuff. So there are certain professions that attract sociopathic people. Now, those sociopathic people may never murder anyone, they might not ever become psychopathic, but they're certainly taking advantage of people because they believe they can. And if someone is too stupid to protect themselves, then they have the right to take advantage of them. That's what a sociopathic person will do. And I ran into a couple when I was practicing law. I ran into a few where I know the person was sociopathic. They were taking advantage of people. They're very, very hard to get. Now, these were civil cases, but they're very hard to get because they're very, very intelligent. And they do things in a way that doesn't make it look like they've done anything wrong.
Well, I think it's an interesting thing that you explored, personality and ethics and so forth. So what are you going to do to Kira next? I mean, you've given us two very different kinds of cases for Kira to be working.
So it's sort of a little bit what I talked to you about is her next case is called Her Cold Justice. And J.P. Harrison, her private investigator, his nephew, a tall young black man, is accused of murdering a drug dealer. And all the evidence seems to indicate that his nephew did it. And so Kira returns from Italy. You know, she's gone to Italy by herself, you know, on her own, just to get some time off. And here's this kid who's being accused. And it gets into that whole issue of, you know, prosecutorial misconduct, possibly, jailhouse informants, you know, all these things. And she's going up against a woman that has established a prosecutor who has established herself as pretty much almost unbeatable. She is incredibly talented, incredibly intuitive, and seems to always find the right witness or the right piece of evidence at the right time to get a conviction. And the only person that's ever really stood up to her and confronted her is Patsy Dugan. And Patsy now is, you know, not in that position. And so, you know, Kira has to go up against this woman. And I liked it because I think it's a fascinating play between two very adept, skilled, professional women. And you really don't know whether he's guilty or not guilty. Every time Kira starts to think maybe he's not guilty, some other piece of evidence comes to light, and it's like, holy shit, you know, what is going on here? So I'm really excited about that book, and you know, I think Kira's just going to keep going as long as readers have a desire to read her stories. There's always the next case, Barb, right? There's
There is.
either a police officer or a lawyer. I mean, I remember that as a lawyer. You know, you get through a big trial, a big thing, and you're just, you know, you think, oh wow, I get to sell. No, you don't get to celebrate. You know, just like the next day you go in and you have a stack of work this high that you've been ignoring because you've been trying that case. There's always another case.
Almost like book selling. You know, there's always another book, always another thing. So what it comes down to, though, in part, is that a defense attorney confronted with this situation virtually has to become a private eye or has to hire one. I mean, because the only way they're gonna combat the prosecutor's case is to do investigations of their own and come up with other evidence, alternative theories, you know, potential other you know, guilty people, whatever. And so I think a good criminal defense attorney, do you think that most of them have investigators, or do you know, do most of them in real life have investigators on staff?
The ones that I've spoken with do. They do. And there are some places, not here in Washington, but there are some cities where the prosecutor's office will also have private investigators on staff that
No,
they,
I knew that. I knew the
yeah.
prosecutors did, but and so in a way, you know, in terms of structure for a legal thriller, in a way, they're a cross between a private eye novel, maybe some of a police procedural, and you know, and then the legal part, which I think makes them interesting. I'm going to try closing the door because I can't seem. I'm the only person home. Right, one sec.
That's okay. Well, I'll answer it. I'll answer it this way.
Stop it.
When when my editor Gracie Doyle said to me, "We'd like you to do another legal thriller series. We think you write courtroom drama very well." My response was, "I would love to do it, but can I do it my way?" Which was, I wanted police procedural, I wanted family dynamics, and then I wanted the trial, because I felt like that's more real life. I always marvel at, you know, people think that when they see a lawyer in the courtroom, that's the lawyer's life. They don't realize that that lawyer goes home and, you know, his kid might be sick, or he might be in a bad relationship and he has to deal with that, or whatever. His dog gets lost and has to spend all night out trying to find his dog. And the next morning he's back in trial and the people think, oh, this is what he does.
Right.
No, but you know, all of us have all these different lives going on. And that's really what I wanted for Kira. I wanted her to have, you know, all of that going on. And of course, you know, because it's a novel and you're trying to create tension on every page, you know, her and one of the homicide detectives have kind of this, relationship that borders on romance, but they don't want to go down that path because their careers are so different. And yet, he's a good guy, she's good. They both deserve somebody good, but is it going to happen? Who knows?
Well, and that has sometimes that relationship has been a reporter, somebody sometimes it's two women, female friendship, and one of them is a reporter, and after the story, and the other one is the lawyer, whatever it is. I don't think we've mentioned, although surely should be obvious in this discussion, that Bob was a lawyer.
Yes.
So last year, Bob was the guest of honor at Left Coast Crime, and I was lucky enough, along with his wonderful editor Gracie, to do his guest of honor interview. And I said to the crowd, I said, Bob's professional life is basically, it's a 3-act structure. I mean, there was Bob, the reporter, and then the lawyer. And then there was Bob writing David Sloan for Big Publishing. And then handing him over to Gracie, there's Bob with the police procedural, Tracy Crosswhite, Seattle Cop and all, and taking off in a new direction with the new publisher. And, it has been, it really has been a 3-act drama for you. Let's not make it 4. Let's
Yeah.
do 3.
Yeah, and I'm really blessed and fortunate that, I have an editor that when I said to her, I'd really like to write, I'd really like you to take a look at this literary novel I've written called The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell. She was totally open to it. The same with The World Played Chess and
Yeah.
Hold Strong, which is coming out in January. It's a World War II book. That was incredible research done by the two people that I co-wrote it with, Jeff Langholtz and Chris Crabtree. And they were very open to the me writing different genres. And I love that. I mean, I love being able to step outside of, I don't want to write just police procedurals.
Right.
The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell has a lot of very deep meaning, not only for me, but for a lot of people who read the book. So not to get egotistical or get too altruistic, but I just think there are other books out there that I'm meant to write.
I think there are too. And I think it's wonderful that have the talent and the drive. You also have a great family support, not just your publisher. Then you have me. So
Yeah.
it all works out. So Patrick, on that happy note, why don't you come and join us and see if we have any questions from the audience? And I really mean that when I say how proud I am of the fact that Bob and I have been able to spend all this time together. It's one of the most meaningful relationships with an author that we have had.
Yeah, and I will echo that as well. The Poison Pen has been incredibly gracious and helpful to my career. And you and I have talked about this many times, but for you, there might not be a Tracy Crosswhite. So
Very true. Right. Bob and I plotted that book together. He thinks it was on our patio. I'm pretty sure it was in my library. It doesn't really matter. But anyway, it was a new start. So, Patrick, have we got any questions?
Not too many. There was one, okay, someone's just asking if you're planning on going to Left Coast next year in Denver.
I don't know yet. As I mentioned to Barb, my travel schedule is so crazy, and I really am trying to cut back on the amount that I travel. I don't want to travel 110,000 miles again next year, so I'm going to have to kind of see how things transpire.
It's also the same weekend as the Tucson Festival of Books, which
Um,
occasionally happens. Because Tucson, I mean, it's in April, I think it is, if I have that right. So I'm not going either because the Tucson Festival often, it always brings authors to the bookstore, and
yeah,
it's a very busy time for us. So not a good time for me to be out of town. It's in Denver,
yeah,
this time around.
yeah.
Let's see. Lori asks, did I miss it or did Bob mention that there will be another historical following a killing on the hill? So maybe with the same.
Not at present. I certainly have an idea to write. Instead of a killing on the hill, I was going to call it a killing on the track and bring back Long Acres Racetrack, which was this famed horse racing track here in Seattle. But because of logistics with the other two series, I got to figure out a way that I could work that story in, but still have the other series come out on regular intervals so that readers aren't waiting too long for the next Kira book or the next Tracy book.
So Bob's already indicated he's cutting back on travel, so that probably gives him an extra month where he could knock out this other book. Yeah, seriously. I mean, it really is a matter of time. I think that, so far your publisher seems to be willing to publish whatever you write when it's ready. Although publishers have schedules too, and even if they have a book, they have to follow certain rhythms and demands, and there's lead time involved in us. So it's very hard to just pop in a novel.
It is. They have to get the cover right. They have to get the title right. They have to get the blurbs on the book. Oh, there's a lot of things that go into it, and a lot of people that go into it. And I've said this before that I'm extremely grateful for the people that edit my books, the developmental edits. Gracie does it. Charlotte Hersher back east. Then I have a great copy editor. And so there's a lot of people that are involved in getting a book out to print.
Absolutely.
Here's the ARC that Barbara left, the Marcia Clark.
There it is. Right.
We're giving her a lot of free promotion here, Bob. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
No, but it actually it does take this argument or this whole interest that Bob has that he's written about in this book and fastens it to a true life case in which a woman actually was put to death as a consequence of prosecutorial misconduct and bad police work and other things. And I think the real outrage that Marcia, who is a prosecutor, outrage that Marcia feels, she talks about it in the foreword to this book. She was just so infuriated by what happened to this woman. Now, Susan Hayward won an Academy Award for her portrayal of Barbara Graham. Do you remember the title of the book, Patrick? I mean, the movie? Sorry, not the book.
Oh, the movie?
Yeah.
I don't.
I remember watching it. It came out in the 50s, and I don't remember, or maybe very early 1960. But it was one of those, it was one of the few movies in which a woman is actually, put to death.
Yeah.
Which is kind of hard for the Hollywood code and
stuff. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you're right. It is, but I think any of you watching this should really want to read Marcia's book too, to see that, what Bob is talking about actually happens, is a confirmation in real life.
And it's a great prequel to Her Cold Justice, which will be coming out next year.
There you go. Right. Maybe
that's exactly what the story is about, is,
I know, I love it.
Prosecutorial misconduct. So
maybe we can get Marcia and Bob on the screen together, even better at the bookstore.
That would be great.
It would be great.
She's a terrific person, Marcia. She really is.
She really is. No, I know it. And I didn't realize she'd been an appellate judge or lawyer for all this time, or judge or whatever it is. So, that'll be fun to talk to her about anyway. Yeah. Sorry, Patrick, carry on.
Well, I'm just kind of looking at YouTube, and I just got an interesting question from, let's see, the question is, the trilogy at Verde River Beach Reads Book Club is watching tonight. We would like to know if Robert does his own research for books. You mentioned a little bit. Yeah.
I do. I've said this before, and Barb knows this. I love to research. I really do, because if it's a topic I'm interested in, then I get to dig into it and dive in and figure stuff out. I was actually in Arizona doing a book club while I was down. The last time I was down, I did the Poison Pen event, and I had 3 book clubs that I was doing. And at one of the book clubs, there was a prosecutor, a defense attorney. There was a defense attorney, and I said to her, what is the rule if you have a client who tells you that they're going to commit a crime? Because I had this idea for a book. And she got back to me, and she said, hey, I did some research for you, and here's what it is. And it meant that I couldn't write the book because it just wouldn't be factual. So I love to do that kind of stuff. I love to do the research, and I love to read, and I love to, when I get that opportunity to sit down and read a good book or read a book on a particular subject, that's what fascinates me. The research that I just did for Her Cold Justice was all about the power of the prosecutor. And I was really amazed. I had never thought about how much power a prosecutor has in a criminal trial. It's scary. It's really scary.
So thank you, book club, for watching. We'll try to work it out so that either you can come to us or we can get Bob to you.
Yeah, and let's see. You may not want to get into this, but they also ask, what are his thoughts on the Menendez brothers situation?
That's a really interesting one. When they were initially tried, and I believe that they were got a hung jury, it was by the defense attorney was that female lawyer, that female defense attorney, and she was brilliant. Every time the jury would come into the room, she would put her arm around the brothers, talk to them very closely. In other words, there's nothing to fear here. These are just two young boys. And she did this brilliant job. Now, eventually they were convicted, but again, that gets to that line, and I don't know the facts well enough to give an informed opinion, but it gets to that line that Barb and I were talking about, which is, where do you draw that line? If someone is being abused, that do they have a right at some point to fight back? Now, the Menendez brothers was just a horrific, horrific crime.
Mhm.
The problem is if we allow people to start doing that without any ramifications, then you start in with the whole idea of vigilantism, and it's just a slippery slope. It's a very, very difficult question, and I don't know where that tipping point is.
Plus, defining abuse and proving abuse is another entirely different thorny hedge that, we'd all be plunging into. So,
Yeah.
that's why I said justice with, society has to find some way to deal with things that have harmed or put people at risk or potentially can. And, was it okay, for example, for our Navy SEALs to hunt down Osama bin Laden in Pakistan and kill him? Is it okay for the Israelis to, just killed Sinwar, whatever all he is as a consequence of war? I mean, I think most of us probably watching this would say yes, but at the same time, I'll tell you when I really, really ran into that is if you're a World War I student, and I was in Australia and New Zealand on Anzac Day, which is a day because the Australian and New Zealand troops were really thrown into the Battle of the Dardanelles in the First World War, which had to do with Turkey, which was an ally of Germany. And it was very badly conducted. It was a Churchill strategy that actually was correct, but the execution of the the British side was just many, many people were killed, and it was a disaster. And so for people on the Allied side of World War I and the British Empire, all of it was a tragedy. Then I was in Turkey on the day that anniversary came around. For Turkey, it was Liberation Day. It was the day that the Ottoman Empire went down. Kemal Ataturk, who commanded the Turkish forces, was the George Washington of the modern Turkey. And, and it really came home to me that, whose ox is gored, or whatever way you want to look at it, for the side that got slaughtered, it was a tragedy. For the side that won, it transformed their whole country.
Yeah.
And, and so that's the problem we have with so many of these cases, trying to weigh the rights of the person who was abused, and then, what do we do about the abuser, and on and on and on. Is murder ever justified? I brought that up earlier when I was talking about the woman doctor who was unfairly, excluded from pursuing her profession. And while, as I said, I think murder was a step too far for her, at the same time, I could certainly empathize as to why she did it.
Yeah. 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 No, it's not an easy question. It's not an easy answer.
No,
Definitely not.
it isn't.
Bob,
And
did you
it's
say
not
that the
always going to be fair. And the results are never are many times not going to be ideal, and very often really unfair.
Right.
Right. Now, I was just going to ask Bob, I may have missed this. Is the World War II set book that you have coming out, is that a nonfiction book, or is that a novel?
It's fictionalized, but it's based on true events. The amount of research that Jeff Langholtz and Chris Crabtree did is phenomenal. It's beyond phenomenal. It's 10 years in the making. So the characters that were created to tell this story, to tell these events, are fictionalized, but they are all based upon true individuals in true events. And what the story really focuses on is a World War II story that I venture to guess 99% of the people out there have never read about or heard about. And that's basically Japanese hell ships, which were ships that were transporting thousands of POWs stuffed into the holds of these ships, where they should hold 300 people, and there'd be 1,800 people in this hold. So it's a fascinating story of one man's journey, from basically the National Guard being federalized by FDR. He gets sent to Manila. He's over in the Philippines. They collapse the Bataan Death March. He ends up in prisoner of war camps. And then, of course, you got the holds of these ships. Meanwhile, his girlfriend, his 17-year-old girlfriend from the same town, is a math prodigy. She's brilliant. And this is also based on true stories. The United States Navy began to recruit from female colleges these women of very high IQs in different fields to become code breakers. So she becomes a code breaker, and their two stories are gonna intermesh again. It's a absolutely remarkable story. It's remarkable. And I was just privileged to be able to help create the characters that come to life in telling it. So it's called Hold Strong. It'll be out in January. I'm coming down to the Poison Pen. We're going to do an event. And I think people that love historical novels or World War II or just a good read, I think you're going to love this story. I really do.
Wow. So did they need you to fictionalize it? They did the factual work, and then your job was to turn it into a
They
novel?
did the factual work. They did a lot of the writing, trying to put together the story. And it came to me sort of circuitously. I said no initially. It was just not something I thought I really wanted to do. Tried to help them to do it on their own. And then when it came to that point where they weren't getting any traction, I just felt that the story was too good, and they had devoted so much of their life that the story needed to be told and needed to be read. And so I agreed to step in and to help them bring it across the finish line.
Will you be appearing with them at events?
I think that'll be something that I'll talk to you all about. One of them is in Costa Rica, so probably not Chris, but Jeff is in Los Angeles, and he's a wealth of information. He's a very personable guy, and really, really knows the history
I
behind
think
the book.
the only thing we need to do pretty quickly is look at dates, because our January is rapidly disappearing.
Yes.
So is Megan in charge of this?
Yeah, Megan Beatty.
I'm going to email her tonight then, because we need to nail down a date in a
Okay.
hurry. Yeah,
Terrific.
that'd be great.
Yeah.
Right. Anything else, Pat? And I'm really looking forward to that, because I think World War II is an endless engine for storytelling. I mean, there are aspects of that war that are still a surprise. All these years later, that it was such a scale and so many people involved in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Well,
Sam Carlson in this book is a projectionist in a movie theater. So he loves the old movies with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers in particular. And so what I did is I sort of framed this as sort of one of those types of stories being told, but I don't obviously I don't try to edit out any of the horror and all those things, but that feeling that you got when you watch those old movies, that's what I wanted the sort of this to be. Is I wanted it, in his picture house, and he's showing these movies, and suddenly he is in this movie. He is part of the movie, right? He's part of the story, and so it was a lot of fun. I really had a great time writing it.
I'm really looking forward to it. I love different narrative structures, so sounds great.
Yeah,
it really does. Right.
I was
Anything else?
looking at these questions. I'm like, who is this Megan person who's very helpful in answering all these questions? She
Email
says,
me.
Hi, Megan.
said that the movie title you were looking for is I Want to Live, of course. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. This
Yeah,
isn't
I Want to Live.
This is an Hayward movie. Thank you.
And someone was asking about when Marsha's coming and December 12th.
Now, is it the 12th or the 14th?
12th.
I can't remember. It's one or
Have
the
you
other.
double booked us?
It's a Thursday. That part I do know. It's whatever the Thursday is in that week. So maybe it is the 12th. Anyway, we're really excited, Megan. Thank you for working it out. Marcia's one of my favorite people.
Other than that, I think we're good.
We're done.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Robert, another fascinating conversation. Thank you very
Yes.
much. Thank you for signing our copies. Now, not all Robert Dugoni books come out in hardcover or hardcover and paperback together. The Crazy Crosswhites do not. But this book, we do have the hardcover, which Bob signed, and then we have unsigned copies of the trade paperback. So you can go either direction. And we're grateful to Bob and to Amazon for being kind enough to get the books to him and get them to us, and they do a great job.
And thank you for helping me make my lunch.
Oh, it was really our pleasure. It'll all be downhill from here.
Great to do
As
it
you
with
go
Rob.
out. What I am going to do, Megan will know this too, is I'm going to send you the links to this. So when you are through with whatever book touring you do, you can just use this because people tend to watch them, months afterward. Actually, you know what? We had a great suggestion at one of our 35th birthday party celebrations a week ago, Sunday, I think it was. I've been saying for ages that we have so many author interviews now, I mean, thousands of them, that we needed some kind of an index. And then somebody pointed out that we could go to YouTube and make a playlist.
Oh, wow.
I never thought of that. I mean, well, why would I? Because I'm a tech idiot, right?
Yeah.
But my my lucky husband, is probably now going to learn how to make playlists.
Actually, we've had those, Barbara. I mean, I've got at least by year, I've got
Yeah,
them all.
but I think it would be great if we could just do a playlist of all Robert Dugoni,
Sure.
and then we could send it to Bob because I mean it's a chronology basically of his career. So I think it'd be wonderful to put it on the website and people could, track down through all these years of your books and listen to us.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't do all of them because we didn't have streaming as much in the early ones, but certainly for the last, I don't know, at least maybe
Yeah,
10
if you search his name on YouTube on our channel, they all come right up.
They do, but I think we can make it easy by actually doing, a playlist
Yeah, you can do that.
and then we could send them to the authors. So
Yeah.
I think it's a wonderful idea. I mean,
Yeah.
we really have created an archive that I think is remarkable for many, many authors, and we need to make it easier for the authors to share it, not just the bookstore, but the authors need to be able to have the archive presented to them.
Sure.
And they can use it as they want to because, let's face it, in-person book tours are ephemeral, right? I mean, you're there on the night and there's conversation. And then if there's no recording of it, then it's gone. If you weren't there, you never get to share it. And so I think it's great. If there was one thing that COVID brought to all of us, it was the fact that we got the best tools so far in Zoom that we have ever had for doing this. We did it for ages on live stream and some other stuff, but Zoom has definitely been the very best one.
Yeah.
For doing this.
Fortunate. I can watch myself age over the years.
You, honey. Farther than you. Patrick and I were talking to Lee Child a couple of weeks ago, and he was feeling all depressed because he turned 70, and I wanted to go, oh, I snickered, It's like, okay. Great. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining us. Good night, everybody.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Bob. Enjoy your
Good night.